The water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
Chris Bailey, one of my longtime friends. We lived on the same floor together in a building in Louisville. Welcome to Founder Secrets. Happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
So Chris is like who I go to when I have hardware questions. Hardware extraordinaire, built 2 companies in the hardware space. And we just found out 20 minutes ago that Arduino, who's a major player in the hardware space, is getting acquired. So maybe Chris will have a hot take on that. Flavio doesn't even know. But to start, we'll start as we always do with icebreakers that we'll all answer. So what's a favorite riding route, motorcycle or biking? Chris, do you have one? You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I haven't been on a motorcycle since I had kids. So that's been like over 7 years. When you know the statistics that motorcyclists are 30 times more likely to die than passengers in a vehicle.
What's the rate of accident? Like, you know what I mean? Like per ride, how much more likely are you to die versus per car ride? Because in the car it says you're right, but also there's so many drives that, you know, it's not as frequent as I would think maybe a motorcycle is. What do you think?
I'd have to look up on ChatGPT to find that answer. But I do know that it's 30 times more likely. Motorcycles are incredibly dangerous, so I don't do those anymore.
What's your favorite ride? What's the one that you used to have, maybe?
Let's talk pedal bikes, because that's what I do now, is I pedal bike. And I live near some really nice parks in the city. And there's Seneca Park right next door. And there's a loop that goes all around this little municipal airport called Bowman Field. It's about a 5-mile loop, so I can leave my house, go through the park, loop around the airport, look at the airplanes in the morning, and get back. And it's a nice like 5.5-mile loop with some hills. Goes through some trails and woods. It's gorgeous.
Do your kids take it?
I used to have one of those seats that sits on the back of your bike. And that was really cool for the first like 2 years of the kid's life. And then they got to be about 3 or 4 and they get so heavy that it's really hard to pedal them around. You know, my oldest son, he's 7. He's just learning to ride on his own. So we go up and down the block together, but we're not doing 5-mile bike rides just yet. I'm really excited to get out there with him though.
Flavio, what about you? What's your favorite route?
Yeah, I also don't ride motorcycles, but the bicycle route, I mean, going up the West Side Highway in New York and then across the George Washington Bridge and then up the Palisades in Jersey, it's just such a beautiful ride. I love it. It's also super long. One time I had to take the train back because it was like going like 30 miles in. There's no way I'm doing another 30 miles back. So took the train back.
Yeah, that's the real deal. Mine would be a similar loop. There's a loop near where we live that's a like a nature reserve, so you can go around. There's no cars. It's beautiful. I do it twice a week, 3 times a week. It's 10.5 miles, so it ends up being about 11 miles total. But it's pretty flat. Well, there are 2 parts of it that are pretty heavy, but it's nice. So it's called the Back Bay Nature Reserve. California does a good job of like preserving nature, oftentimes at the expense of other things. But when you're like, when you can enjoy it, it's like, you get to see the benefits of it. It's like, okay, I wouldn't want to be a developer there, but it's good. So moving on. So Chris, you were a motorcycle rider before you had kids, and then you had this idea for a brake light on the back of a motorcycle that nowadays you have the same issue with electric cars too, right? Back then it was like if you let off the gas in a motorcycle, the brake light wouldn't come on because the person wasn't pushing their brake light. And so your idea was to basically make it so that if the car slowed down, if the motorcycle slowed down, the brake light would come on automatically, even if they didn't press the brake light. Is that right? I've heard the pitch so many times. Was that the original idea behind GearBrake?
Yeah, that is effectively it. It all kind of it started with actually an accident that I saw on the highway. And I assumed that it was caused by a rear-end collision, and it got me thinking about all of this. And that's the story that I used to start on. Um, what's interesting is I had dinner with a lawyer that you had introduced me to, Taylor, and I can't remember his name for the life of me. But I told him the story about how I saw this accident on the highway, and then I started thinking about this, and then I started thinking about that over there, and then I came to this, and he said, "Chris, have you ever seen the movie Amistad?" And I said, "No. What are you talking about?" He goes, "Okay, you need to go home and watch the movie Amistad." He said there's a line in it where uh, Quincy Adams says something to the effect of the one who tells the best story wins. So it's not about, and obviously I don't want to lie. I'm not lying, but you got to tell the best story. And so it got me thinking, okay, how do I recraft this story? And it's not necessarily about seeing a wreck on the highway and doing this and but instead the story became, you know, the story of my bike, how I got it, how my mom told me I was going to wreck it, and I said, "No, mom, I'm not going to wreck my bike," until I did. And when I crafted my pitch in that way, doors unlocked, and it was really fascinating to see after I got that piece of advice. The first pitch competition I came in, I lost, and well, I won the crowd favorite. It was five across over in Jeffersonville. Won the crowd favorite, lost the pitch overall, and I was like, "This sucks. I'm not doing this again." And then everything after I heard that advice, I won all the competitions. It's all about who can tell the best story.
I can't tell. Like for me, those both seem like great stories. I guess how did you know that one was going to be more effective than the other?
I tested them. So, I was in a Velocity Accelerator program. That was when I got accepted to that program. They give you $20,000, and they asked you to be on site full time. At the time, I was working for Siemens Rail, selling train crossing equipment and rail control systems. So that was what convinced me to quit my job. And you go, and every week you're giving the pitch over and over again. And then as you're leading up to pitch practices for competitions or for the final pitch day, you give the same pitch like two or three times, and you get to try different things on people and see what they respond to. And I did this with mentors and with partners and just friends. Taylor, I think we camped up in your office one time, and I gave my pitch, and you guys were like, "Okay, good job, Chris. Take no offense to anything else we say, but here's a different way to think about it." And that was really helpful for me. I think you just got to try it, and the more you try it, the more you get comfortable with it, and it kind of just starts to fall into place after a while.
You did a lot of these pitch competitions. You won a bunch of them. You did the accelerators, right? You did Velocity, as you mentioned, but you also got accepted into Techstars Mobility program. You ended up moving to Detroit for a summer and spending a whole summer in Detroit and going through Techstars and like really embrace Techstars. When I think that Techstars was really kind of like peak Techstars. I think Techstars is not as strong of a brand today as it was back then, but back then, I mean, it was huge. Like I remember,
It was 2015.
yeah, 2015. So can you just talk to A, how'd you get into these programs? Like they're very prestigious, they were very hard to get into. And B, like what impact did going through structured programs like that have on the business and on the way you run the business, how you thought of the business?
My approach, I think it was accidental. I don't think I had some grand vision for it, but in retrospect, looking back, it was more that I just sort of leveraged everything I'd done previously and the people that I'd met into what's the next place I can climb to? Where do I need to go next? And what pieces do I need to fit to be able to get to that? So, for the Velocity Accelerator program, which was the first accelerator program I got into, prior to that, I got involved in the entrepreneurial community and met some of those people, and I had them, write letters of recommendation for me, and that helped me get into Velocity. Getting into Velocity helped me refine my pitch, which helped me win a couple of the regional pitch competitions. And then getting into Techstars was sort of leveraging that, right? Who do I know? Who can who can help give me advice on what these people are looking for. That was a big thing. I just sort of reached out and I said, hey, who knows about Techstars? What are they looking for? And I learned that they're looking for people that are coachable, and they're wanting to invest in teams. That's their big thing. They want to invest in teams. They want you to have a good path for where you're going, and they want you to be sort of smart and capable and able to run really fast. And that's what I crafted my entire pitch and application around. Um, and and just, before you walk in, I found there was a way that I could get myself psyched up. You have a little caffeine, you get excited, you say, here's how this pitch is going to go, and here's how I'm going to feel afterwards. And that just gives you a ton of energy to go in and show them that you're a team that's really enthusiastic about this, you're capable, and you've done this in the past.
Can you speak to like the team? Like, you had a co-founder.
The team is tough because I didn't have any money to start out with. So it was very much who's willing to work for equity. And your options are very limited there. What I found was it was best to look for people that had sort of motorcycle passion and experience. And I was lucky that my co-founder, the guy that I was able to convince to leave his excellent job at Siemens and come work with me, he worked alongside me at Siemens. We got our MBA together. Um, and then let's see, I hired a bunch of people from GE. So we have GE appliances in town. They do a lot of electrical design. And a lot of those guys are really bored with their corporate day job doing engineering. And the idea, and this was 2015 too. So tech startups and exits where, everyone was getting rich on paper. And, I was able to say, hey, I can pay you in equity. Here's how we can do this. And so that's how I grew the team initially until I was able to get the funding. Just trying to get people excited about equity. There was really no cash involved with most of it.
Usually, hardware engineers aren't the most extroverted people. I'm wondering, like, were you always like this, or was this like a skill you had to develop? You're like, all right, I'm not gonna switch off my engineering head. I'm gonna go into like pitch, storytelling mode.
So here's a secret. I'm not an engineer by education. So that was problem number one. Um, so what I did is my co-founder, he was a mechanical engineer. So I filled that gap there. Um, and then just trying to get out into the community and figure out, I asked everyone, do you know anyone who rides motorcycles? Because I want to talk to them. And found a lot of people that way. We have um, a local community of uh, nerds that I love. I'm a member of this community, so I don't say that in a derogatory sense, but it's called Level One, and it's a hacker space or a maker space in the basement of an office building, and probably the cheapest rent that you could find. And I reached out to the community. I said, "Hey, here's what I'm doing. Who's interested in helping?" And a couple of people reached out, or they said, "Here, check out this person." Um, and then eventually I figured, you know what, I can learn some of this engineering stuff. So I just rolled up my sleeves and worked alongside some of those guys. And instead of saying, hey, here's a project, I need you to go do it, it was, hey, here's a project, how are we going to figure this out together? And I got to learn and bounce ideas off of. That was some of my favorite parts.
So you're saying the extroversion you've always had, and you've added on the engineering.
I'm not a true extrovert. I can be an extrovert uh, for small periods of time before I get exhausted. So after this, for example, I'm going to need to just take some time to myself and go and decompress. So a lot of people they call me an extrovert. I'm not, but I can go out and fake it for long enough for it to matter.
How'd you get like the first prototype? Because I think a lot of people who listen to an idea like yours maybe jump straight to the end, right? They jump to kind of the business questions, some of the things we're talking about. But how does someone make, like if I think in my head, I'm not an engineer, right? So if I think in my head, how would I make a brake light? I don't know. I guess I would find somebody that had made one, or found someone that made someone similar, right? Maybe like how, and this is way before ChatGPT, right? When you were doing all this, so I assume today it'd be much easier. You'd be able to like ask and prompt ChatGPT to at least get an idea. But how were you able to get that first prototype out, like something you could show people?
What I did is back in these days, I had an interest in Arduinos, which an Arduino is it's a microprocessor, a little microcontroller. It runs a type of C++ called Arduino code, and you can program it to do all kinds of stuff. You got GPIO, general purpose inputs and outputs. I had, and this is actually this was all coming off of a previous startup that I had where I was actually importing bulk electronics. So I had this Arduino hobby where I like to buy these sensors and program these microcontrollers. And I discovered accidentally that if you bought 10 of them, sold 9 of them, you could keep the extra one for free. And I was like, huh, well, I wonder if I bought 100. Okay, well, I can make a little bit of money on that. What if I bought 1,000? Oh, okay. So I just reached out on eBay to the people that were selling these things in bulk, and I said, "Hey, I want to buy 1,000 of these. How much? What price can you give me?" And they'd be like, "Okay, I can give it to you for $1 a piece." Oh, well, that guy said 87 cents. Like, do you want? And I don't know these people, so I don't care if they're like, "Oh, he's hardballing me." And eventually I was like importing like 8 grand a month into my apartment but I had to bag. This is when FBA, fulfillment by Amazon, had just come out, and you could ship your stuff to Amazon and they would sell it. Built that up. I mean, I was doing a decent chunk of business. Um, it was fun, but eventually that's all just a race to the bottom, and I didn't want to keep going down that path. It didn't seem like value creation. It was just sort of, it's geographic arbitrage effectively is what I was doing. But that was like 15, 20 years ago. So anyway, I had this huge box of Arduino parts, and one of those parts was an accelerometer, which is it's a device that can detect motion, right? So if you tilt things or shake them, it can detect that, and give you like a G-force rating off of that, or the amount of acceleration coming off of it. Then I paired that with the Arduino and a little LED strip and a 9-volt battery, and I put it in an Altoids box. And everywhere I went, all of these, these coffee meetups and entrepreneurial events, they're like, "Hey, Chris, how's your brake light thing going?" I'm like, "Oh, check this out," and I could kind of show them. And really, I mean, even just an Altoids can that you tilt, it was enough for them to go, "Oh, wow, this guy, he not only had an idea, but he's willing to go and put in some work. He's technical enough to put something together on his own." And the people that I talked to previously, they were able to see that progress. And they were like, "Okay, this guy's not just talking about what he wants to do, he's doing it." And so that was what triggered, "Hey, I've got an engineer that you should talk to," or those kind of conversations. Nowadays, that's gotten even easier. Uh, a lot of these components, you don't even have to wire them up. It's all plug and play now with Arduino and a lot of the stuff that's coming out with them. You plug components together, you can prototype very quickly. With ChatGPT, it'll guide you step by step. You just copy the code in and do it. I mean, we're very close to, you just like talk to the computer. You say, "I want something that can light a light when I shake it," and it will just do it. We're very close to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a big lesson in what you just talked about, where every time somebody sees you, that there's like forward momentum or progress. It's like, hey, because we've all met people at these events that for 4 years they've been coming to the event and they're at the same spot they were 4 years ago, and that's kind of majority of people, I think, who have ideas, who have this stuff, and so one major way to step out is to do what you did. But how did you, I remember that Altoids box. How did you, going from that to something that, you could really sell? Because you ended up selling these products. People were buying them online. It became, a business with production and talk us through that. Like how did you go from the Altoids box into something that you could sell and that people who didn't even know you were buying them?
I was poor. I had no money, and I was on an airplane coming back from a sales trip, and happened to strike up a conversation with a guy next to me, and he was a banker, a local banker. We were both flying back to Louisville. We had a layover. We stopped, and we just kind of got to chatting. And I told him about some of the stuff that I was working on. He's like, "Oh, that's so cool. We should grab lunch." We grabbed lunch, and he's like, "Hey, would you want any money to help get started with this?" And I'm like, "Well, what are you thinking?" He's like, "Well, I could give you a line of credit." And in my head, I was like, wow, this guy believes in me. He's going to, extend me a line. And I didn't have any assets to me. So it was pretty risky on his part. Uh, when I mentioned this to some of my mentors, they were like, God, no, please do not do this, which is the same advice that I give to people now when they're in that situation. Don't take on personal debt to fund projects. But I did it anyway. And
I can't believe that guy convinced his bank to give you a loan.
well, he was, I mean, everyone at a bank that isn't sitting at the front desk is a VP, but he was a VP, and he was able to get it through. Um, and yeah, he gave me a $100,000 line of credit.
A lot of money.
Wow. With no assets underlying.
He said, we call these character loans. And effectively, it's him going before his board and saying, I vouch for this person's character. This guy's going to pay us back one way or another. Like, he's not going to be like, we may we may need a judgment against him, but we're gonna get our money back out of him. So I took $10,000 out of that. He gave me a cashier's check at a breakfast once, and I went and deposited it. And I found there was a group. Um, it's Alex Fromeyer with Beam Technologies. Alex, he had a toothbrush company. He started the first connected toothbrush.
They're still around.
They're still around, and there was a period of time between their first gen release and their subsequent funding rounds where they needed some work to keep them busy. So I hired them. I wasn't an engineer yet. I hadn't gone through YouTube University. Uh, and Alex, and his engineer Dan put this product together. It took about a month or two to kind of get it finalized. It wasn't super complex. It was basically just a smaller version of the Arduino prototype that I'd put together. They picked out a microcontroller, they picked out an accelerometer, and all of the circuitry that goes around it, put it on a PCB, and then we ran some tests and optimized it. Um, and then we put it in a little plastic box and shipped it.
To who?
I did a crowdfunding campaign. We sold, I think it was actually about 12. So I don't want to sell myself short. We did about 12 of it. I didn't understand digital marketing at all, or how to do any of this. But that was enough for me to go like, okay, somebody wants these. I'm going to make these. And we literally, I went to Walmart. I bought a toaster oven, and I learned how to do SMT, so surface mount technologies, putting components on little PCBs, and then you put those PCBs in a toaster oven, and you heat them to the right temperature, and that melts the solder and adheres all of the electrical components. We hand built the first like 100 of these devices out of a toaster oven.
This sounds like it would burn your house down.
No, it's a toaster oven.
Or your fingers.
Or your fingers, yeah.
I had a digital thermometer that I ran inside of there, and there's fancy equipment, and I have all of this fancy equipment now, or it's even easier to just pay someone else to do this. But at the time, there weren't some of these places like PCBWay, JLC PCB, where you can just say, I need a PCB and I need it next week, and here's all of my files. It was you've got to work with a local PCB manufacturer. You need to get set up. There's minimums. It would have been an extremely expensive process. So instead, you order the PCBs, you assemble it, you put it in a toaster oven, and then you do really good testing on it.
Okay, so you send it to 12 people. How did it go from there?
so once we had the product ready to sell, it became a little easier for me. So I came from more of a traditional sales where you knock on doors. So that's what I started doing. I started going to every dealership, knocking on doors and telling the dealerships, hey, just take 5 of these. If they don't sell, I'll buy them back. Don't worry. And they're like, oh, that's cool. And so I was able to get them in 5 stores here locally. And then, I was able to find some other stores outside of Louisville. I eventually found a sales rep who was in the power sports industry. He knew motorcycles. He knew all the guys at the big distributors, and he's like, "I can sell this for you." So we came up with um, this way for him to go out, and he was just an outside sales rep. He would call. He knew all the guys. He'd call them up and say, "Hey, I've got this new product. Here's what it is." And we were able to get into like all the big catalogs, like Pepper Rocky and Harley Davidson, Cycle Gear. We got into Cycle Gear, which they have like 100 something stores in the US. So we wound up having global distribution. I think we sold 10, 20,000 of these by the end of it, but it was very much a brute force, sort of picking up the phone and kind of a top down, a push sales method as opposed to like a pull or trying to engage the consumers. I didn't have a great grasp. I eventually figured that out. I eventually figured out how to convince people to buy this, but that's when I started running into problems with customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. I could sell 1,000 of these in a day, no problem, but it's going to cost me like 5, 10 grand to sell those, and you have no margin left. That was ultimately what led me to the path of, hey, this isn't going to work. You've pushed it through all of the distributors as hard as you can. You're on the shelves, um, but how can you create that low enough customer acquisition cost for the lifetime value? It's a piece of hardware. This isn't a SaaS model or hardware as a service even. Hardware as a service really wasn't even a concept that many people were talking about back then. They would give me $70 for the final device if a person bought it directly from me. If the distributor bought it, they were paying 20 something dollars for it. So the margins were very slim, and I ultimately decided this could be a really good lifestyle business, where this is what I do. I might make 100 grand a year, but I'd already gotten investors by that point. And I was like, you know what? I owe it to these investors to try to turn this into something other than a hobby or a lifestyle business. So that's when we started thinking about some of the other opportunities and other spaces that we could get into that were more venture scalable.
Was that right around Techstars, or how was Techstars in that time frame?
Yeah, that was right around Techstars, and Techstars they even told me, Ted Serbinsky, he was an awesome guy. He was the director of that program. He goes, all right, we want you to come in, but I want to know that you're thinking bigger than just this brake light thing. I want to know that you're thinking digital, you're thinking um, uh, like telematics, informatics, something with a bigger hook than just this brake light thing. And I was like, yes, that is the path we're going. Absolutely, that's what we wanted to.
Well, can you kind of like lay out, like, some people may not know what Techstars is. Like, what is Techstars? Like, why was it appealing to you? What was the program kind of like?
Techstars started by Brad Feld and several other people that had done very well in the entrepreneurial community. They actually came up with the word accelerator. They were the ones that, I mean, I don't remember where they were, but they were like, what do we call this? And then someone threw out the word accelerator program. Um, they Let's see, when I went through the program, they said that they let in less than 1% of applicants. And every program had applicants from every continent. Like it was a very prestigious program. They give you a couple $100,000 in cash. They take a little bit of equity, but the biggest thing is they have a huge mentor network. They have a partner network, and they have an excellent investor network. So when you pair all that together, the average raise coming out of Techstars is $1 million. So we knew that if we were wanted to grow and wanted to accelerate, pardon that, but we were going to have to go that path, and that was an important one for us.
And so what was that like? Like, what did you learn from?
We show up, and we're in this awkward spot where we have a device that is selling. We've sold tens of thousands of units. If you look at our revenue, it's we're doing this, and we're telling these advisors and mentors, yeah, here's what we've done, but we don't really care a lot about that. Here's what we want to do, which is I'm sure you hear people say this all the time, and it's super scary. It makes people go, wait a second, what the hell are you talking about? You have revenue, you're just jumping to the next shiny thing. We got a ton of pushback on that, of just jumping to the next shiny thing. I think there's, in retrospect, there's some value to that, but we really did find a bigger opportunity, and that was in the telematics space. This was 2015.
Wait, what's telematics?
Telematics, yeah. So OnStar, are you familiar with OnStar GM?
Is that like the button you push in the car that gets the support?
Yes. Yeah. If you crashed, if you needed assistance, you could push a button and it would send notifications. If you had a crash, it would send automatic notifications. If your car was stolen, it could help track it. A lot of these have been just sort of built into cars now, so, or phones. So it's not as much of a standalone product. But at the time, we went to some of these auto shows in Detroit, and that was all anyone was talking about was telematics and cars. And there was a ton of investment money happening in that, but no one was talking about that with motorcycles at all. And when I looked at all of the options that were available in the car sections, none of them would be able to apply to the motorcycle. A lot of them plugged into the OBD2 port, the onboard diagnostic port that's kind of under your steering wheel, under your dashboard, or they were built into the car from the factory. And so we thought, we have experience with motorcycles, technology, and and interfacing with motorcycles. Maybe we could be the ones that pull that information out of motorcycles and enable a connected motorcycle.
That's a great idea.
What was interesting is talking about that. It felt different. It felt different than talking about a brake light. When I would talk about a brake light, I would get a lot of, oh, that's nice. Oh, cool. But when I was sitting there with a VP of a major insurance company, and I was telling him about what we were, I told him about the brake light stuff, and he's like, "Oh, okay, that's neat, cool." And then I told him about how we wanted to get data out of motorcycles, like ride data, analytics, um, location. His eyes kind of lit up, and he was VP of innovation there, and he was like, "What? Okay, well let's. What are you doing for dinner?" And I was like, "All right, okay. There's a different market opportunity here." We wound up doing a deal where they would get exclusivity in the insurance market for a set period of time, and they would pilot it to their team. They would help us out with all of this, and they would give us $50,000 in sort of pre pre-sales. So they're just like, here's a $50,000 check, and we want to be the first ones to be able to pilot this. So we were able to leverage Techstars into that introduction with the insurance company, as well as, we were talking with Honda, Yamaha, a lot of the other motorcycle companies. They were all interested. And once we switched to telematics, we tried this with brake lights, and nobody wanted to talk to us about anything. We got some nervous motorcycle riders to buy these, and we got some of the catalogs to say, "Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, let's stock it on our shelves." But it wasn't until we were talking about telematics and data that people really perked up and wanted to be on top of it. So that was the path that we were going. We leveraged that into about $1 million raise coming out of Techstars. Um, built, yeah, built the team, um, and and then the hard work actually started.
Making it work.
Making it work. This was back in the days when if you wanted to build a connected technology product, you couldn't just buy something off the shelf and program it. You had to build effectively a cell phone from scratch. You had to buy the cell chip and the Bluetooth chip and the accelerometer chip, and put it on the PCB. And then you had to get all the drivers to work. And then you had to get all the libraries to talk with each other. And then you had to do all the controls. And we had GPS lock issues. So we had to figure out the optimal position for the GPS antenna. It was a nightmare. We spent a couple of years trying to get this to work, and I hired very smart people. They were excellent. We were able to make good progress. The problem we had was when we were ready to ship and deliver this pilot, we were doing energy testing, and we found that it was killing the motorcycle battery within like 4 days, which is just it's unacceptable. You can't. That's not a real product, because motorcycles will sit for weeks or months sometimes in people's garages, and they need to be able to start it up. A lot of this stemmed from the fact that we needed Bluetooth to be always on, because the insurance company told us they needed an active alarm system. And the way that we were enabling the active alarm system was Bluetooth Classic is always listening for a connection. It makes a connection, then we say unlock. And the insurance company said, well, we can't cover the cost of this product for these pilots unless it has an alarm system, because that's a checkbox in our actuarial tables. So we couldn't take that feature away. This was Bluetooth Classic. Bluetooth Low Energy wasn't out yet. Bluetooth now, I mean, the AirTags, right? They last a year on these batteries, and it's Bluetooth, just broadcasting all the time. It was, from the time we discovered that bug to the time we shut it down, was about a year of, can we get the library to do this? Can we get it to go into a low energy mode? And ultimately, it was around 2017, 2018. We were running out of money. I reached out to the investors just to let them know, hey, I mean, I give them monthly updates, so this was not a surprise at all. And I got a lot of advice for, hey, if your startup's starting to fail, what do you do? And that was, let your investors know everything, every bit along the way, zero surprises. And they started saying, okay, well, put a deck together and let us know what you need to keep this going. And it was a really tough decision, but I ultimately had to decide that our team was burnt out. Our cap table was just a mess, and we're now a couple years behind the ball. The last thing I wanted to do was take on additional investor money and start putting good money after bad, and so made the call. What's interesting is around that time that I was making that call, there was a company called Particle. I believe they started out as a connected light bulb company. And as they were shutting down, they went, wait, what else could we do? Oh, other people want to enable connected hardware products. They came out with a product called the Asset Tracker that was exactly what we were doing, except it was just a programmable black box that you could make it do anything. And so within about 2 weeks, I recreated everything that we had done at virtually no expense, almost on my own. And I was like, oh no, now what do I do? Do I give this one last shot? And ultimately decided that it was too late, and we all needed to just sort of walk away from this. But it was a hell of a learning process.
Can you speak to, because I think that people hear a lot about successes, and I would consider this a success, right? Massive learning, and it really helped into what you're doing today, and great story and all these things. But I'm sure at the time, emotionally, it did not feel that way. Can you just kind of speak to, how did you emotionally, were you just done? It sounds like you were just, I'm done. I've put in as much effort as I can, and you were married, right? So I'm sure there's like family elements to this, where you're like, I can't just keep doing this. Can you just speak to like the emotion of that at the end, and how you feel about that now? Like, I'm sure at that time it felt terrible, and some people might be going through a similar time like that, and maybe they feel, I've certainly felt that way at times. So how did you feel then? And then looking back on it, how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, you're totally right. I'd gotten married. I had a kid coming, and it was hard because, I see myself as someone who never wants to give up. And you hear a lot of, uh, when you talk to successful people and you ask them, well, what's their secret to success? A lot of them will say, well, I just never gave up. And, when we thought we were about to give up, we just kept going. So it was very hard to do, but ultimately, I just decided that I wasn't up to the challenge of going on any further with it. And that's a very hard place to be, especially when you're on the hook for $1 million from investors. And I did not take that lightly. That is ultimately, I mean, I was very concerned about my employees. But they're going to go out and get, and they did. They all went out and made way more money than I was paying them, and they were able to leverage the experience they had from what they did with with our company, to better jobs and better salaries. But it was the investors, and I reached out to them, and to my surprise, I thought there was going to be a lot of, "Hey, Chris, how could you have lost my money? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?" Instead, it was, "Okay, great. Here's the process. Here's what I'm going to need. I'm going to need some forms for my taxes so that I can write this off." And for the most part, we had coffee. I gave them those forms, and they're like, "Hey, if you do something else, let me know." And that was very eye opening for me. The second aspect was the community. I was very concerned about what the community was going to think, because I thought there was going to be a, "Oh yeah, Chris just shut this down, and he failed," but it wasn't. People were curious about what happened, and I found that if I was open and I shared my journey with others, nobody cared. And it was also, the bar was now down here, so I had nowhere to go but up. Um, so it looking back on it, it was, I mean, one of the best things that could have happened to me. Um, I've also learned in the projects, so in that project, but also in projects going forward. um, I would get nervous when we would find an "oh no" moment, right? Where you think, if I can't fix this problem, the path is over, the trajectory is done. And what I found is every project of significance that I've done before that and since that, you're gonna have a moment like that. It's not, roses and there's just, you're climbing steps right after. You're gonna have that moment of, wow, this really could fail right here, right now. And the best thing that I can do is just sort of buckle in the seat and figure out a way out. With Revio, we were out of options. I couldn't find another way out of it. But going forward with other projects, I've been able to find my way out of it, and that's been very rewarding to look back on that and go, okay, I learned something from that, and I'm growing since then.
What's also interesting as we kind of wrap here is that you went back into hardware right after, or right at towards the end, or right after it, and created a whole new business and a different product line. And as far as I know, you kind of kept it yourself. Like you didn't bring in a whole lot. Like you had a couple people helping you out, but it was 99%. I'm sure you were marketing it. You came up with it. You built it. You really took on the engineering, and so can you just kind of speak to that? And you later ended up selling that business. Could one have happened without the other, or do you think? Yeah, how were they related at all, or no?
I couldn't have done the second startup without the learnings and the failings in the first startup. I told myself when I was shut down the first company, I'm never starting a business again. I, in fact, I thought I was going to be a stay-at-home dad. And that was my goal, is I'm going to stay at home with my kid. Well, I couldn't sit still. I wanted to build something. I wanted to get it out there. And next thing you know, I've got something that people, I'm selling it on Reddit of all places. They're asking me to send these to them faster than I can make them. And I'm like, uh-oh, I did it again. So I said, okay, if I continue on with this and I turn it into a business, I've got some rules. I'm not going to take on any investor funding. This is all going to be bootstrapped, and my customers are going to fund me. And that's since day one. They paid me up front for all the hardware before I even bought parts and sent it. The next thing is, I wasn't going to fuss with IP or legal or advertising or consultants or office space or equity or any of that garb. Like, when you're a CEO and you're growing it, that's like 90% of your job. And it was miserable. I hated it. I'm just going to focus on building really cool stuff, and that's it. And that's the path that we did. When I got too busy to build it myself, I reached out. I was like, hey, who at this like local nerd shop can help me solder? You don't even need to learn how to solder. I'll teach you to solder. And next thing you know, I've got like 5 people in my basement soldering stuff together. We're growing, and it was a blast. It was a ton of fun, and it was just a very different way to do it that I could have never envisioned hardware, because previously I was trained, you need a lawyer, you need this, you need that, and you don't need any of that stuff. I mean, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing life sciences, maybe, but if you just want to build like really cool stuff in your garage, you can make a very good business off of that, grow it and exit it without any of that.
I love it. I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, and keeping the control yourself, and keeping, we started this talking about story and the stories that we tell. There's also a story we tell ourselves, right? And the stories that we tell other people, we tell ourselves, and if if we're able to control everything, then it just feels like a more honest story, maybe, or it's not honest or not, but it's a better story if you can do everything yourself. And do you have, as we wind down, do you have any advice for, let's say it's a 21-year-old person who maybe they have a hardware idea and nowadays, and they have no idea, they hear some of the things you're talking about and they're like, you sold 10, 20,000 units, you talk to insurance executives, these things all sound very, very difficult to them. It's like a big mountain to them. Like, any advice to that person who just they're starting out in this journey and they have an idea in hardware, and what would you tell them?
From a hardware perspective, I think start tinkering with it, right? Start learning. I didn't go to engineering school. I went to business school. I'm an MBA, but I learned that if I wanted to run a successful hardware company, I need to know the hardware, right? I need to know what's happening so that we don't wind up accidentally creating a product after $1 million that kills the motorcycle battery in 4 days. Like, I need to know those gotcha moments so that when we get to that stage, I knew what to plan for. So I think learn how to build the product yourself, at least the prototype. And you can't outsource passion, right? So don't think that you're going to hire a marketing consultant that's going to help you sell. I mean, maybe it works for some people, but no one holds the passion in the same way that you do. And I think that if you really have the passion and some skills to be able to do this, you're going to be able to run so much faster with that passion and your own skill set than trying to raise money and farm all of that out to different people and coordinate it.
Wonderful place to end, I think. Chris, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down. Hey.